Some Marvel heroes didn't fall in battle, they were gone by backlash. A hero meant to inspire turned into a stereotype. A rebel written as progressive was suddenly too offensive, and characters once celebrated became reminders of how tone-deaf comics could be. From caricatures to obnoxious writing and other controversies, these weren't simple cancellations. They were cultural corrections that buried entire legacies. So which Marvel characters were disappeared for crossing the line? Here are 10 heroes and villains Marvel canceled for being problematic. At number 10, we have Whitewash Jones. In 1941, Marvel's Golden Age introduced Washington Whitewash Jones in Young Allies, Issue 1. He was meant to join Captain America's Kid Gang, but what appeared on the page was a cruel caricature. Drawn in blackface style with exaggerated features, his very first line was a watermelon joke, turning a supposed hero into a racist stereotype. For years, Whitewash stood as a reminder of how deep prejudice ran, even in comics that preached freedom. When society began to change, Marvel quietly buried him. The Young Allies vanished, and Whitewash disappeared with them. Disappeared not by death, but by embarrassment. Decades later, in 2009, writers Roger Stern, Nick Dragotta, and Marco Santucci brought him back in Captain America, Allies Forever. This time, he was portrayed as a real man, intelligent, brave, and angry that propaganda once distorted his image. Readers responded with shock and reflection, seeing how far Marvel and the world had come. Since then, Whitewash Jones has remained silent, his name a cautionary echo from Marvel's darkest ink. At number 9, we have Marcus, son of Immortus. Marcus first appeared in Avengers issue 200 in 1980, during Marvel's Bronze Age. Introduced as the son of Immortus, his debut quickly became one of the most controversial stories in comic history. Inside that issue, Marcus trapped Carol Danvers in limbo and used his psychic powers to make her love him, manipulating her into bearing his child. When she returned to Earth, she unknowingly gave birth to Marcus himself, who matured within moments and convinced her to leave again as his lover. Fans were horrified, calling the story a violation of everything Miss Marvel stood for. Even Marvel's own writers condemned it. The backlash forced a rewrite the following year, when Chris Claremont brought Carol back in Avengers Annual Issue 10. There, she reclaimed her voice and revealed the truth of Marcus's control before he rapidly aged and died. The public reaction was explosive, and Marvel disappeared Marcus forever, leaving his name as a warning of how deeply one story can break trust. At number 8, we have Sabra. Sabra first appeared in Incredible Hulk issue 256 in 1981, created during Marvel's Bronze Age as Israel's answer to Captain America. Ruth Bat-Seraph was a government-backed mutant agent, proud, loyal, and unwavering. But the stories that followed painted her with troubling simplicity. In early issues, she distrusted Palestinians, calling them destroyers by default, and saw every Arab as a rival. Her missions blurred the line between heroism and propaganda, turning her into a symbol of division rather than peace. When the real-world Sabra disaster darkened history a year later, her very name became a painful reminder. Readers reacted with discomfort, and debates erupted about politics invading Marvel's pages. By the 1990s, Marvel quietly shelved her, leaving her to fade into obscurity. Years later, when Marvel announced her film debut, it reignited controversy across the world. To avoid reopening old wounds, Marvel reimagined her, removing the government ties and hard edges, but her past still lingers, etched into Marvel's uneasy legacy. At number 7, we have Arabian Night. Arabian Night first appeared in Incredible Hulk issue 257 in 1981 during Marvel's Bronze Age. Abdul Qamar was created as a Middle Eastern superhero, but what readers saw instead was a stereotype brought to life. Draped in robes and a turban, flying on a magic carpet, and swinging a curved scimitar, he looked like he had stepped straight out of a storybook rather than a modern comic. His dialogue was fiery, his pride exaggerated, and his portrayal reduced an entire culture to a set of cliches. When the world changed, Marvel realized this image no longer fit. Quietly, the character was retired, his adventures ending as quickly as they began. In 2001, he was killed off, closing the chapter on a hero who never truly represented his people. Years later, a new Arabian Night appeared, modern, restrained, and stripped of stereotypes, but he too faded. Readers had already moved on, and many viewed the original as a painful reminder of how careless comics once were. The next three take Marvel's mistakes even further. Heroes built on stereotypes, names born from tragedy, and symbols that aged into shame. At number 6, we have Sumo. Sumo first appeared in New Mutants issue 93 in 1990, during Marvel's Modern Age. He was introduced as a Japanese mutant villain whose entire persona revolved around a single stereotype. His codename wasn't creative, it was just Sumo. He was a massive man in a loincloth who used his size as a weapon, designed to look and act like a caricature of Japanese culture. Alongside fellow villains Kamikaze and Dragoness, he formed part of a trio that reduced Japanese identity to cliches. Readers saw instantly that he wasn't a character, he was a trope. Marvel realized there was no depth to explore and quietly dropped him. Not long after, Sumo was killed during the Executioner's Song storyline and never brought back. His name disappeared from the pages, replaced by more thoughtful representations of Japanese heroes in later years. Fans who revisited his issues called him a lazy relic of his time, proof that stereotypes could never carry real stories again. At number 5, we have Kamikaze. Kamikaze first appeared in New Mutants issue 93 in 1990, during Marvel's Modern Age. He was a Japanese mutant whose very name came from one of the darkest chapters of World War II. Gifted with the power to fly and explode on impact, Kamikaze was portrayed as a living weapon, a man destined to die every time he attacked. His costume bore the rising sun emblem, and his name alone echoed the image of Japan's wartime pilots. Alongside villains like Sumo and Dragoness, he formed a trio that turned Japanese identity into a punchline of cliches. In 1992's X-Force issue 16, Kamikaze met a violent end when Archangel's razor wing struck him mid-air, killing him instantly. Marvel never brought him back. His death closed the door on a character defined by stereotype rather than story. Readers later looked back with disbelief, calling him one of the most insensitive creations of the era, a relic that showed how far comics still had to evolve. At number 4, we have the Hypno Hustler. The Hypno Hustler first appeared in Spectacular Spider-Man issue 24 in 1978, created during Marvel's Bronze Age. Antoine Del Swan was a disco singer who used hypnotic music to rob his audiences, a villain born from the flashing lights of the 1970s. But beneath the funk and rhythm was something more uncomfortable. His jive-talking, afro-wearing image echoed the blaxploitation craze of that era, where African characters were exaggerated, flashy, and often criminal. The name Hustler tied him to that stereotype, turning cultural style into a caricature. When disco faded, so did he. Readers mocked him as one of Spider-Man's lamest foes, and Marvel quietly buried the character, letting him vanish into obscurity. He wasn't killed, just forgotten, left behind by a world that had outgrown his image. Years later, Hypno Hustler resurfaced only as a punchline, a reminder of how easily style can become a stereotype. Fans laughed, but also cringed, seeing how one villain captured an entire era's blind spot. The final stretch reveals Marvel's most uncomfortable truths: villains who embodied racism, heroes rewritten by history, and legends forever scarred by their origins. At number 3, we have the Mandarin. The Mandarin first appeared in Tales of Suspense issue 50 in 1964, during Marvel's Silver Age. Created as Iron Man's greatest enemy, he was introduced as a Chinese warlord wielding 10 mystical rings of power. But beneath the genius and grandeur was a character shaped by Cold War fear. His slanted eyes, flowing robes, and imperial name echoed the Fu Manchu yellow peril stereotype, an embodiment of Western anxiety about Asia's rise. To many readers, he wasn't just a villain, he was propaganda drawn in ink. As times changed, Marvel realized the problem. The Mandarin's early image felt openly racist and outdated. Rather than erase him completely, Marvel reshaped him, removing the caricature and making him a modern warlord, a strategist bound by ideology instead of ethnicity. In films, he was reborn as Xu Wenwu, a complex father figure rather than a stereotype. The public response was relief and praise, welcoming a version that finally gave the legend its dignity back. The final stretch reveals Marvel's most uncomfortable truths: villains who embodied racism, heroes rewritten by history, and legends forever scarred by their origins. At number 2, we have M'Baku, the man-ape. M'Baku first appeared in Avengers issue 62 in 1969 during Marvel's Silver Age. Once the proud warrior of Wakanda, he challenged T'Challa for leadership and took on the name Man-Ape. His costume was the skin of a white gorilla. his strength drawn from consuming its flesh. But the imagery was devastatingly misguided. A black man portrayed as a gorilla, feeding a racist trope that had long dehumanized Africans. The intent may have been mythic, but the result was painful. Marvel eventually realized that the name and visuals carried a weight they could not defend. Over time, the title Man-Ape was gone, and M'Baku was allowed to stand simply as himself. In the films, he became a proud leader of the Jabari tribe, fierce yet noble, never mocked by symbolism. Fans welcomed the change, praising how he was transformed from stereotype to strength. Through reinvention, M'Baku proved a character could be redeemed without denying the past. At number 1, we have Big Bertha. Big Bertha first appeared in West Coast Avengers number 46 in 1989 during Marvel's Modern Age. Ashley Crawford was a glamorous model who could transform her body into a massive, super strong hero called Big Bertha. But behind the humor was a cruel twist. Her transformation relied on binge eating to grow, then purging to shrink, literally vomiting to return to her slim form. The idea was played for laughs, turning a serious issue like bulimia into a punchline. Her powers made her the butt of fat jokes, contrasting her obese hero form with her thin, beautiful civilian identity. As time passed, readers saw the cruelty in that contrast. Marvel quietly backed away, softening the portrayal and dropping the bulimia gags entirely. In later comics, Bertha fought with confidence, even embracing her size as strength. Fans reacted with discomfort to her early stories, but appreciated her evolution. Through silence and subtle rewrites, Marvel let Big Bertha grow from mockery into quiet redemption. Thanks for watching the video, comment down below your favorite part, and let us know. Also press the subscribe button and bell icon for regular updates.